It was, as I said, a long day of testimony today. I want to take a minute and walk through some of the highlights or some of the most important moments. It's a full day of testimony that was split into two parts. So in the morning, we heard from two witnesses who were actually on the July 25th call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. That would be Jennifer Williams, who's a career Foreign Service officer currently detailed to the office of the vice president, and the man I just mentioned, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who's the director for European Affairs at the National Security Council. Both of these individuals are career professionals who currently work for the Trump administration. You would call them Trump White House officials if you were quoting them anonymously, okay? And that's despite what the White House wants to say about them being deep state traitors. And they testified that not only was President Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president not a, quote, perfect call, it was alarming and possibly illegal.
Now, Ms. Williams, prior to the July 25th call, approximately how many calls between the President of the United States and foreign leaders had you listened to?
I would say roughly a dozen.
Had you ever heard a call like this?
As I testified before, I believe what I found unusual or different about this call was the President's reference to specific investigations, and that struck me as different than other calls I had listened to.
You testified that you thought it was political in nature. Why did you think that?
I thought that the references to specific individuals and investigations, such as former Vice President Biden and his son, struck me as political in nature, given that the former Vice President is a political opponent of the President.
You too were on the White House call, am I right? You heard it with your own ears.
Correct.
Not secondhand, not from somebody else, not hearsay, right?
Correct.
You heard the President's voice on the call.
I did.
And you heard him raise that subject again that Ambassador Sondland had raised before about investigating the Bidens, right?
I did.
And I want to ask you, when you heard him say that, what was the first thought that went through your mind?
Frankly, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was probably an element of shock that maybe in certain regards my worst fear of how our Ukraine policy could play out was playing out, and how this was likely to have significant implications for U.S. national security.
That was the morning. And then this afternoon, the hearing that just ended, we heard from two witnesses, again, requested by Republicans. That would be Tim Morrison, former White House aide with the National Security Council, a long time, to be clear, Hill staffer for multiple Republican lawmakers. He's part of the sort of professional class of Republican aides and staffers. That's his career. And Ambassador Kurt Volker, the former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine, a career diplomat who served under both Republican and Democratic presidents, who got this job named by President Trump. And what we got from Volker were attempts to explain away some glaring inconsistencies in his previous testimony. He said that maybe he didn't quite realize he was in the middle of a corrupt attempted extortion, but had he known he was, well, then he definitely would have said something about it.
In hindsight, I now understand that others saw the idea of investigating possible corruption involving the Ukrainian company Burisma as equivalent to investigating former Vice President Biden. I saw them as very different, the former being appropriate and unremarkable, the latter being unacceptable. In retrospect, I should have seen that connection differently, and had I done so, I would have raised my own objections.
The other Republican witness, Tim Morrison, was very straightforward, careful in his testimony, but unmistakably, time and again, Morrison testified that when he learned more about the extortion scheme, he always went right to the lawyers. Here's what happened after EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland told Morrison that he had told the Ukrainians the military aid was just flat out dependent on an announcement of investigations.
Did you tell Ambassador Bolton about this conversation as well?
I reached out to him as well and requested his availability for a secure phone call.
And what was his response when you explained to him what Ambassador Sondland had said?
Tell the lawyers.
Did you go tell the lawyers?
When I returned to the States, yes.
Now, a few days later, on September 7th, you spoke again to Ambassador Sondland, who told you that he had just gotten off the phone with President Trump. Isn't that right?
That sounds correct, yes.
Did you tell Ambassador Bolton about this conversation as well?
I did, yes.
And what did he say to you?
He said to tell the lawyers.
Just to be clear, that is a lifelong Republican staffer called as a essentially defense witness, the Republican Party and the president, saying multiple times that he went and told the lawyers what was happening because of alarm. about the situation. That was the defense witness today. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.